Midnight hums like a machine that's trying not to wake the building. Perihelion is happening off camera, too close to the sun for any telescope on our side of Earth to watch. If the numbers bend tonight, every cautious phrase we've rehearsed about natural visitors stops being enough. I press rec, and the control room feels 1 degree colder. The studio 2 floors up is dark, audience seats covered in plastic. Down here, the light is all screens, stacked, tiled, washing the room in blues and grays that make everyone look sleep-deprived and underwater. The main wall carries 4 feeds: our network rundown, the Space Agency public channel, a private window into the MPC feed, and a residual plot that, for now, is just a flat line waiting for the universe to disagree with it. I'm leaning on the back of the control chair, headset crooked around my neck instead of on my ears. Old habit. I like hearing the room first. The vents sigh. Someone's pen taps against a mug. The server closet behind us drones like distant traffic. "Alex, your logging slate's still blank," Jamal says from graphics, not looking away from his own monitors. "You want me to timecode it off master control?" "No," I say. "Local time. I want our clock on this." I flip the slate window open, 11 minutes and 3 seconds, NNS Special, 3i/Atlas Perihelion, raw log. I type my initials into the metadata field and hit enter. A thin green bar at the bottom starts to crawl. One file. One shot at not mangling it. On the center console, the MPC feed scrolls as a river of gray text: observatory codes, timestamps, NOOBS, placeholders where the sun currently owns the sky. Solar conjunction means we can't see the object directly, we can only wait for the math to come back and tell us where it went. "Ortiz on in 60, Maya calls out. She's our segment EP, her hair knotted into something that used to be a bun 6 hours ago. She's popped her blazer off, rolled up shirt sleeves, press badge still clipped like a reminder we're supposed to be adults. She taps her keyboard, brings up the secure call interface. Arizona line is green. "Alex, you're moderating, I'm just eavesdropping and panicking about language." "As always," I say. Comforting. My phone buzzes on the desk next to the console, face down. I don't have to flip it to know what it is. Legal. Standards. The email they promised hours ago and we pretended we could delay by not opening it. "Put Ortiz on speaker," I say. "I'll read the funeral rites while she talks." The line clicks, crackles, then a voice comes through, soft but clipped, like she's been awake longer than we have. "This is Lila. You've got me until the east horizon burns." "NNS Control, New York," Maya says. "We're rolling on all channels. You're on with Alex." I lean toward the mic. "Hey, Lila. We're live to tape, no one's on the couch upstairs. It's just us and the log. Best kind of audience," she says. "You seeing anything?" I glance at the residual plot. It's a blank grid, axes labeled in tiny font, waiting for points to appear. Right now it's a very expensive piece of graph paper. MPC feed shows no OBS until after conjunction. I want to walk through our plan and make sure I'm not about to misquote physics on national television. "Good start," she says. "Walk me through your lower third." I alt-tab to the template. The text blinks in bright white over a dark strip: "Interstellar object near perihelion, what we know." Something in me flinches at the second half. What we know. It's never what we know. It's what we're willing to say. I erase the second line, feel Maya's eyes on the back of my neck. The ghost of last decade's circus hovers in the back of my head: Oumuamua, the papers, the podcasts, the fight between people who wanted to call it alien and people who wanted to call it boring. Careers bent sideways because someone reached for the wrong adjective too early. Right now it says, "What we know," I tell her. I'm thinking tracking the unknown gets us fired, so I'm open to suggestions. "Call it what it is," Lila says. Interstellar object near perihelion. That's already extraordinary. You don't need fireworks. I type it in, interstellar object near perihelion, data watch. The cursor blinks after watch like it's counting my courage. Legal sent you the guidelines, she adds. Not yet, I lie. My phone buzzes again. I flip it this time. The subject line is a neat little guillotine, NNS special segment, language guidance, 3i/Atlas. I open it on the secondary screen. The mail is longer than it needs to be, so my eyes find the bolded sentences first. No references to artificial, engineered, craft, or technology in connection with the object absent explicit confirmation by U.S. or international space agencies. Avoid speculative analogies, e.g., probe, device, signal, in host commentary. Emphasize uncertainty and natural explanations where reasonable doubt exists. Extraordinary claims, etc., etc. We've got our marching orders, I say into the mic, no adjectives that sound like science fiction. No probe, no ship, no engineered. Good, Lila says. We're not there anyway. She pauses. I imagine her rubbing her eyes in a glow of a different console, somewhere in the desert. Listen, the action tonight is boring. Perihelion is where a small push buys the most energy. If there is any non-gravitational acceleration, it'll show up as a slow drift in the residuals after we reacquire it. You won't get a light show. Slow drift we can do, I say. Dots on lines. America loves dots on lines. Jamal snorts. America loves explosions, he mutters, too low for the mic, loud enough for me. We're selling drizzle. The room settles into a waiting rhythm. Maya coordinates with master control for a skeleton crew upstairs, just in case, a floor manager, one camera op, a sleepy anchor who was promised a boring overnight and a chance to say, historic, without breaking anything. Jamal builds graphics we may never use. The network rundown ticks on one screen, politics and storms and a pre-packaged feel-good human interest piece slotted for 2:45. Our segment sits in the grid, gray and tentative, with a little label next to it, hold. It's not a command yet. It's a threat. On the residual plot, the axes are still empty. Remind me when reacquisition window starts, I say. Lila answers without rustling paper. For our geometry, first decent chance is 4:12 Universal Time Coordinated. Call it 4 a.m. for you. If we miss that, we wait roughly a day for the angle to shift. So we can't watch, I say. We wait for numbers. Welcome to my life. She exhales into the line. Look, don't overthink it. Residuals aren't opinions, they're the distance between what we saw and what we swore the universe would do. That line is good enough to steal. I jotted in my notebook with her initials. If the story survives, it'll make the script. If not, it'll be one more quote no one heard. The first hour crawls. The room's conversation ebbs into whispers. Coffee cools in paper cups. I check the MPC window every few minutes even though I know nothing new can be there yet, habit and superstition in equal parts. The sun owns the sky and until it lets go, all we have is models. At 1:03, the server status window blinks yellow for 3 seconds, then green. Jamal glances up. That's just the backup archive kicking in, he says before I can ask. Relax. I am relaxed, I say, standing ramrod straight behind a chair at 1 a.m. Maya tosses a stress ball at my shoulder. It bounces off, rolls under the console. You get like this every time we touch space, she says. We've done launches, spacewalks, the James Webb fiasco, that time an astronaut clogged a toilet on ISS and we had to say, waste management 15 times on air. You survived. This isn't that, I say. She watches me for a second longer than is comfortable. Because it's interstellar? Because we got caught last time, I say. We weren't even leading that Balian chorus and we still got dragged for how we framed Oumuamua. I don't feel like spending another year explaining to strangers on the internet that anomalous doesn't mean little green men. Then don't, she says. Be boring. Boring and right. I look at the blank residual plot. Boring and right would be a flat line, noise within the model, a graceful exit. We'll wrap by dawn, cut a sober package, and the object will keep on sailing where no one can see it. I tell myself that's what I want. At 2:19, Lila drops off to recalibrate something on her end, promising to rejoin before the window. The room thins further. Master control upstairs goes into overnight autopilot, feeding reruns and promos. Down here, we're a pocket of stubborn wakefulness in a building determined to sleep. I sit at my desk just off the main console, pull up the script template. The opening VO is mostly placeholders. Tonight, astronomers around the world. I cut that. Too grandiose for an empty control room and a single sleepy feed from Arizona. Overnight, a small team of scientists and engineers. Cut. I land on something skeletal. In the early hours of this morning, a rare visitor from beyond our solar system reaches its closest point to the sun. We can't see it, we can only watch the numbers. I leave a bracket for the next line, if residuals normal, versus, if residuals drift. Two separate paths, two futures. One, we shrug and move on. The other, we tiptoe into a new vocabulary and hope the internet doesn't eat us alive. I save the file, name it, 3i_atlas_perihelion_script_draft_AR_001. My initials look small next to the events. I flick back to the CMS. Our segment is still in the rundown, gray, with the label hold and a tooltip that appears when I hover, pending legal review/scientific confirmation. The anchor's name is grayed out too, as if even he is on hold. Alex, Jamal says quietly. Plot just toggled live. I look up. On the residual screen, a thin line has appeared, horizontal, hugging zero, with a single dot blinking at the start. Time markers creep along the bottom, lagging by a few minutes from real time. It's just a setup frame, the pipeline saying, I'm ready. But my pulse jumps anyway. We're not at window yet, I murmur. That's just the aperture yawning. Creepier way to say, we're ready, Jamal says. I'll take it. 3:58, Lila comes back on the line, voice rougher. We're aligned, she says. Error bars trimmed as much as I can justify. If it behaves, we'll call it boring. If not, we emphasize uncertainty and natural explanations, I recite from the email. She laughs once, without humor. You do that. At 4:13, the first real point lands on the residual plot. A small dot appears just above the zero line, inside a shaded cone of expected noise. My chest loosens. That's fine, Maya says behind me. That's totally fine. One dot is nothing, Lila says over speaker. It's just a number. The second point arrives a few minutes later. Slightly higher, still within the cone, but close enough to its previous neighbor that my editor brain, trained on graphs for election nights and pandemic curves, starts drawing invisible lines between them. Talk to me, Lila, I say. Still boring? Still boring, she says. Patterns don't start with 2. The third point does not land where the model wants it. It appears outside the shaded cone, 1 mm on the screen, a lot more out there. If the first 2 dots hinted at a slope, the third underlines it, making the line too straight to be noise and too gentle to be a glitch. The room doesn't gasp. It exhales and then forgets how to inhale. What's your floor on outgassing? I ask, because I have to, because that's the first safe thing and the last safe thing. On the line, there is a fumble of keys, a rustle of paper that I know is really the sound of someone stalling for the math to catch up. Lower than this, she says. No qualifiers. No, probably, no, we think. Just lower than this. The air recalculates. Jamal swivels in his chair, staring at the plot like it owes him money. Maya's fingers freeze above her keyboard, half a word hanging on screen. On the wall, the shaded cone of what we swore the universe would do suddenly looks like an overconfident prediction from an election we lost years ago. So that's drift, I say. My voice doesn't sound like mine. That's drift, Lila echoes. There's a pause that might be 1 second or 5 years. Don't call it anything else yet. My monitor pings. A red dot appears on the CMS tab. I click it out of reflex, hating myself even as I do. A new banner has appeared above our segment, status. Hold, updated. Below it, a short note from standards, timestamped 30 seconds ago. Until further review, no on-air characterization of observed deviations as non-gravitational or anomalous acceleration. Use language, data being evaluated by astronomers. Segment remains on hold. You've got mail, Jamal says tightly. Our favorite kind. They're watching the same feeds, Maya mutters. Remote access. Somebody saw that third point and panicked before we did. My badge vibrates against my chest. I glance down. The little NFC icon pulses red instead of green. I stand, cross to the side door that leads to the small edit suite where we cut specials. Swipe. The reader blinks green, then red, and stays there. Access denied. Are you kidding me? I say, too loud. The word echoes off the consoles. Jamal raises his eyebrows. They just locked you out of your own edit bay? Probably a glitch, Maya offers. She doesn't sound convinced. I try again. Same red blink, same denial. Not a glitch. A small, silent correction from upstairs: you can watch, you can log, but you don't move the levers until we say so. I walk back to the console, every step a little too loud. The residual plot is still on screen, all 3 dots now connected by the laziest of lines, gentle, persistent drift. If it keeps up like this, in an hour it will be something no one can wave away with outgassing, in a straight face. If it dies back into the cone, we'll all laugh about how jittery we were. My lower third template sits open on the secondary monitor. Interstellar object near perihelion, data watch. Beneath it, I'd written the bracketed options, the script forks. I delete the line that says, if residuals normal. Highlight, backspace, gone. Alex, Maya says softly. We're not airing tonight. I know, I say. My hands move anyway. I open the logging directory, drill down through the maze of nested folders until I find tonight's file. 3i_atlas_perihelion_raw_nns_001. I right-click, copy, paste into my user workspace, a corner of the server they haven't thought to fence off yet. I rename the copy, 3i_atlas_perihelion_log_ar_0413. My initials. The time of the third point. What are you doing? Jamal asks. He's not accusing. He's genuinely curious, like he's watching a wildlife documentary. Mirroring the logs, I say. Hashing the bundle. If they freeze the main path, I want a clean copy. Lila's still on the line. You're quiet over there, she says. What's happening on your end? I glance at the CMS banner, at my stubbornly red badge icon. Policy, I say. Nothing you haven't seen before. You want me to stop sending you fit updates? She asks. That'd make somebody happy. I shake my head, even though she can't see it. Keep them coming. Residuals don't care about our categories. Another point appears on the plot. Slightly higher again, marching in the same direction. The cone is now clearly wrong. The line is something else. The hold label on our rundown doesn't flicker. It just sits there, a gray lid on a pot that's starting to rattle. Alex, Maya says. If we sit on this and someone else goes, we're dead. If we jump and we're wrong, we're dead. Pick your ghost. I'm not publishing, I say. I'm recording. There's a difference. I open a simple hashing tool we use for archiving sensitive footage, war zones, whistleblower interviews, anything we might have to prove we didn't tamper with later. I drop my mirrored log into it. The program spits out a long string of numbers and letters. I paste it into my notebook file next to the time, next to Lila's quote about residuals. Proof that whatever this is, we saw it when we said we did. The building above us stays dark and heavy. Somewhere, a cleaning crew wheels a cart down an empty hallway, unaware that 2 floors below, a handful of people are arguing with the friction between policy and physics. On the wall, the residual plot keeps drawing itself, dot by dot, minute by minute, a quiet, stubborn curve away from the story we promised to tell our viewers. We're still wreck? I ask. Jamal checks his panel. Red lights on, he says. Server's happy. No one's cut us off yet. Good, I say. I don't sit back down. I stand behind the chair with my hand on the top, feeling the faint vibration of fans and air and something else I can't name. I glance once more at the CMS. Our segment line is gray, stamped hold in all caps. Below it, in small text, is an auto-refresh timer, next review, 5 o'clock. Policy is willing to wait. The sky isn't. I add one more note to my file, hold applied at first sign of drift. Then, beneath it, without thinking too hard, we keep logging. The monitors glow in their cold colors. The server hum deepens, or maybe I'm just hearing it differently now. On the residual plot, the latest dot is still a fresh, bright mark in a growing line. Upstairs, the studio can sleep a while longer. Down here, the story has already moved. The tag says hold, the numbers don't. By the time the building remembers what morning is supposed to feel like, the residual line has stopped pretending to be anything but drift. It's only a few dots on a silent screen, barely lifting off the cone of expectations we drew around it, but once you see the slope you can't unsee it. The CMS still says hold in gray, like a lid. The hallway outside smells faintly of cleaning chemicals and stale coffee. Somewhere above us, the early morning show team starts to trickle in, laughing too loudly for the hour. Down here, it's still night. I sit at my desk in the control room, the lights turned down low enough that the monitors are the brightest things in the room. The log file I mirrored last hour, 3i_atlas_perihelion_log_ar_0413, sits in a folder named workspace_alex on the server. I open a terminal window, fingers moving on autopilot. SHA-256 sum 3i_atlas_perihelion_log_ar_0413. The machine thinks for a second, then spills a long string of characters that mean this is exactly what it is right now. I copy the hash into my notebook, next to the time of the third point and Lila's quote about residuals. I send myself a plain text email from my newsroom account, subject line, log hash, internal only. No drama, no commentary. Just the hash, the file name, the timestamp. If anyone ever asks when we knew, I want something that isn't just my memory. You look like you just wrote your will, Maya says. She's leaning in the doorway with 2 paper cups, offers one in my direction. The overhead fluorescents in the hallway carve shadows under her eyes. Black, she adds. Before you ask. I take the cup. It's lukewarm, but it's caffeine. I backed up the log, I say. Standard archive procedure. Standard archive procedure doesn't usually involve you copying it to your user folder and hashing it like it's a leak, she says, stepping inside. The door sighs shut behind her, muting the hallway noise. Jamal is slumped in his chair at the graphics station, headphones around his neck, attention still fixed on the residual plot even though nothing new has landed in the last few minutes. I'm not leaking anything, I say. I'm making sure if someone cleans up the main file, we have a way to prove it used to look different. You think they'd actually scrub it? Jamal asks without turning. I think nobody likes being first on something that might blow up in their face, I say. And right now that log is radioactive. Maya takes a sip of her own coffee, makes a face. Legal's going to want a meeting at 9 with standards and the science board, she says. Until then, we log, we don't characterize, we sleep in shifts if we're lucky. We can't just sit on this, I say. If that drift holds and we're the only ones watching, we're not the only ones, she cuts in. Lila's team is watching. MPC's watching. Half the observatories in the Western Hemisphere have it on their schedules even if they say they don't care. And what happens if our feed gets throttled and theirs doesn't? I ask. Our access is already getting nibbled at the edges. They just locked me out of my own edit bay. Maya blows out a breath. So what do you want to do that doesn't get us fired before breakfast? I stare at the residual plot. The last point is still hanging there outside the cone, stubborn. We need more eyes on the numbers, I say finally. Not YouTube eyes, not Twitter. Professional eyes. South of the equator. Different geometry. Maybe radio. Somewhere our standards department doesn't have a hotline into the control room. And you want to be the one who asks, she says. It's not really a question. If I don't, someone else will with worse instincts for adjectives, I say. Let me talk to Lila off the main call. Quietly. No adjectives, just numbers. Maya glances at the wall clocks, New York, UTC, Mountain Time, Santiago. You've got a couple of hours before the first morning meeting circus, she says. Ping whoever you have to ping. Keep it boring. Keep it logged. She taps the top of my monitor twice with the knuckle of one finger, like a blessing or a warning, and heads back toward master control. The door closes, and the hum settles in again. I pull up Lila's direct chat in the secure messaging client we use with outside experts. Her status dot is green. Of course she's still awake. I type, "You still live?" She replies in seconds. Barely. What's your residual plot doing now? I screenshot our plot window, crop out everything that screams, network, and CMS, and paste it into the chat. Can't send raw images through this client without someone upstairs having a heart attack, but I can describe shapes. I type, gentle upward drift, 4 points now, all same sign. Errors trimmed? She replies, as trimmed as they're going to get without lying. Floor for outgassing is below what we see. We're not in comet country. I stare at that line for a long beat. Then, who else can see this quickly and quietly? South Hemisphere. High aperture. Maybe radio. What's your budget? I glance around the control room like someone is going to answer that for me. Jamal is half asleep behind his screen, drums his fingers without rhythm. What's our budget for not looking stupid? I mutter. Then I type, assume $0 and no legal paperwork until after the fact. Need people who care more about being right than being first. She sends a name and a location. Reyes, CTO, Chile. They're already running follow-up on 3i. And, Harrison, VLA, New Mexico. Radio can't see the object, but can scan for tail artifacts. I can CC you on a thread if you promise to behave. What does behave mean? I'll introduce you as network contact for coordination, not guy who wants aliens. I wince even alone at my desk. Deal, I type. No adjectives, just numbers. She replies with a single check mark emoji. Then, window for South Optics is 6:40 to 7:05 Universal Time Coordinated. Dawn on their end. If they miss it, skies get messy. If we want them, we need to send our drift fit before 6 o'clock. I'll attach ours. Don't forward beyond them without asking. I check the clock labeled UTC, 4:27. 90 minutes. Enough time to do this carefully or sloppily and not much in between. Jamal, I say. He startles upright, pulls his headphones off. Yeah. I need you to export our residuals as a clean table, I say. Time in UTC, residual in arc seconds, error bars, all that boring stuff you love. No logos, no overlays, just the numbers we saw when we saw them. You sending homework to the cool kids, he asks. Something like that, I say. South America wants to see if we're hallucinating. He rubs his eyes, cracks his knuckles, starts typing. On my screen, an email from legal pings into existence, then another from standards. The subject lines are variations on segment status and coordination with external partners. I drag both into a folder labeled later and don't open them. If I see the word liability right now, I might throw something at a very expensive monitor. 10 minutes later, Jamal drops a CSV file into a shared drive, names it, resids_NNS_3I_Atlas_UTC_clean. There, he says. No colors, no branding. Just dots that want friends. You're a saint, I tell him. Put it in your hash vault or whatever, too. I write a short, surgical message in a new thread that includes Lila, Dr. Reyes in Chile, and Dr. Harrison at the VLA. Subject, 3I/Atlas, post-perihelion residuals, coordination. Body, colleagues, please find attached our preliminary residuals fit for 3I/Atlas from 4:12 to 5:03 Universal Time Coordinated, derived from Observatory Code Redacted, Photometry. Error model and time standard attached. We observe a small but sustained deviation from the nominal gravitational solution. Magnitude remains within order of magnitude expectations for non-gravitational effects but exceeds our baseline floor for outgassing under assumed parameters. We are not making any public claims at this time. This note is strictly for coordination and independent verification. Any updated fits or constraints from your facilities would be deeply appreciated. Best, Alex Reed Science and Special Projects National News Service, NNS. I read it 3 times, looking for anything that sounds like I'm trying to sell a story. No adjectives. No engineered. No probe. Just small but sustained deviation and order of magnitude expectations. It's the closest I can get to shouting without leaving a fingerprint. I attach the CSV Jamal made, plus a short text file with our time server details and assumptions. I hit send. The room doesn't change. The building doesn't tremble. The servers keep humming their indifferent tune. On the wall, the residual plot doesn't know it's been sent out into the world. There, I say mostly to myself. Now it's not just ours. If we get yelled at, I'm blaming you, Jamal says, but there's no heat in it. He leans back in his chair, eyes closed, letting the residual line paint his lids in phantom green. The hours between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock feel like someone pressed slow motion on the night. Soft light begins to leak in from the hallway as the sun comes up over Manhattan, turning the edges of the monitors pale. The early anchor sticks his head in once, hair still in street mode, tie draped over his shoulder, and asks, "We doing space or no space?" No space yet, Maya tells him from the doorway. Go practice saying inflation 50 different ways. He grins, leaves. At 6:12, we get our first reply. Dr. Harrison from the VLA, short and to the point, receiving. No immediate expectation of line emission from this class of object, but can schedule a short track to look for unusual broadband variability in solar-wind interaction. Window 650 to 720 Universal Time Coordinated. Will share non-processed levels only. No adjectives. I smile despite myself. Another email follows 30 seconds later. Dr. Reyes, your drift is interesting. We have it in queue pre-dawn. Seeing similar behavior in preliminary fit from last night's data, but error bars still large. Will update within the hour, no external distribution. Appreciate the early heads up. The phrase, similar behavior, hangs in my head like a tuning fork. My coffee is cold by now. I drink it anyway. South America's in, I say to Maya when she swings by my desk. They're already seeing hints we're not crazy. She exhales, somewhere between relief and dread. Happy for you, she says. Legal, meanwhile, has moved from curious to concerned. You'll love this. She drops a printed memo on my keyboard, their idea of emphasis. I read. Policy update, 3i/Atlas coverage. Bulleted sentences in corporate font, no extraordinary language, non-gravitational acceleration, unmodeled force, engineered trajectory, may be used on air without at least 3 independent confirmations from recognized scientific institutions. Until such confirmations are obtained, on-air language is limited to, astronomers are evaluating new data, models are being updated, some observations suggest deviations from earlier predictions. Hosts and correspondents must avoid speculative framing that implies artificial origin or intent. All scripts require standards and legal sign-off prior to broadcast. They put engineered trajectory in scare quotes, I say. Like they're daring us to say it. You weren't going to use that anyway, Maya says. Now you have cover not to. They also banned non-gravitational acceleration until we have 3 confirmations, I say. That's not extraordinary language, that's literally what the math would call it. Math doesn't have lawyers, she says. We do. I pull up my draft script from earlier, the one that still has bracketed paths. In one version, I'd written, tonight, astronomers detected signs of a possible non-gravitational acceleration in the path of interstellar object 3i/Atlas. I delete the phrase, non-gravitational acceleration. I replace it with, tonight. Astronomers detected signs that the object is drifting away from earlier predictions, in ways they are still working to explain. It feels like changing a diagnosis to, something's wrong, because the hospital PR team thinks the real word is too scary. We cut adjectives, I say quietly. Keep the math. The new script sits there, obedient. The residual plot on the wall does not care. At 6:47 Universal Time Coordinated, just before the Chilean window opens, the MPC feed throws up a new entry with a different observatory code. The residual plot flickers, recalibrates its axis, and a new dot appears slightly later in time than our last one. It lands not on the cone, but just above the line we've been secretly tracing in our heads, a stranger's agreement with our private suspicion. That from Reyes? Jamal asks, sitting up. Different code, I say. Could be them, could be someone else in their network. Either way, that's not noise. The next 10 minutes are a slow strobe of new points. One from our original source, one from a southern station, one from another telescope I only recognize because I spent a summer writing copy about it during a launch special. The dots don't stack perfectly, they're jittery, fuzzed by their own uncertainties. But the trend is clear. Upward, away from the cone, in lockstep with our earlier drift. 1 dot is nothing, I mutter. 2 is temptation. 3 makes a line, Jamal finishes. Then, as another point lands in almost insulting agreement with the imaginary line, 4 is when you start losing sleep. My inbox pings. Lila, this time, we're updating solution. Your residuals are in good company. Drift magnitude approximate 1 mm per second over hours. That's small in real units, big in model space. Still no outgassing profile that covers this without weird assumptions. A second later, another mail. Reyes. Confirm upward drift consistent with NNS provided residuals. Direction not sunward, pattern persists across multiple filters. Recommending joint note to MPC once we have another night. I read the line twice. Direction not sunward. If it were simple outgassing, like a comet bleeding off volatiles as it warms, the push would tend to be away from the sun. This isn't that. I type back, fingers suddenly clumsy. Magnitude? I send. Reyes replies almost immediately. Above expected outgassing. Wrong direction. I don't realize I've read the words out loud until Jamal says, "Who said that?" Chilly, I say. The control room feels smaller, like the walls have leaned in. The monitors hum. The air conditioning kicks on, blowing a draft across the back of my neck. And Lila confirmed the floor? Maya asks from behind me. I don't know when she came back in. She says we're above any reasonable comet model, I say. Numbers don't match the story. No one speaks for a moment. The residual plot doesn't care that 3 people in a half-lit New York control room are suddenly breathing shallower. The line it's drawing is the same line it would draw if no one watched it. I turn back to my terminal. The hash tool is still open from earlier. It expects input. I pull the updated residual file Jamal just exported, now including the Chilean points, into place. The program grinds, then spits out another hash. I paste it into my notebook, under a new heading, Post-Conjunction Drift, Multi-Site. Beneath it, I type, without thinking too hard, we are not alone in the data anymore. Okay, Maya says, breaking the spell. We have 2, maybe 3 independent datasets sneaking up on the same story. Careful with that word, I say reflexively. Quiet, I'm talking, she snaps, then softens it with a half smile. We've got drift in multiple places. Legal says we need 3 confirmations before we can even hint at non-gravitational on air. Do we have 3? We have us, I say. We have Lila's fit. We have Reyes's hint. Harrison's radio track won't tell us about drift, but it might flag something weird in the environment. So we have 2.5, Jamal says. A solid maybe. And everyone is saying don't you dare call this anything yet, Maya adds. So what do we do? Besides stare at the line until our eyes bleed. I scroll through my inbox until I find something not from legal or standards, a circular from the Minor Planets Center about target of opportunity requests for unusual objects. It's dry, procedural, from weeks ago. A different story. A different night. But the mechanism is there. We file a 2, I say. We ask for more eyes. No press release, no splash. Just a formal, please look here now, in the language the system understands. Maya crosses her arms. And you want to sign it? Who else? I say. I already stuck my name on the email to Reyes and Harrison. If this goes sideways, I'm in the line of fire whether I sign a 2 or not. I open a new document. The cursor blinks at the top of a blank page, ready to become something that might haunt me for years. I write, target of opportunity request, 3I/Atlas post-perihelion behavior. Then, beneath it, summary, recent photometric observations of interstellar object 3I/Atlas from multiple facilities, including, codes redacted, indicate a small, sustained deviation from the nominal gravitational trajectory in the hours following perihelion. The observed residuals are consistent across independent datasets and exceed expected contributions from standard non-gravitational effects, e.g., outgassing, solar radiation pressure, under conventional assumptions. While the magnitude of the deviation remains modest in physical units, -1 mm/s over several hours, its persistence and direction, non-sunward, merit further scrutiny. We request high-cadence follow-up observations from participating observatories during the next available viewing windows to better constrain the nature of this behavior. This request is made solely for the purpose of scientific verification and does not imply any claim regarding the origin or artificiality of the object. I stop, read that last line twice. Strike the word artificiality, replace it with, does not imply any claim beyond the data described herein. I add a section titled Requested Actions, and bullet out reasonable asks, increased cadence during the next 24 hours, inclusion in queue for high-sensitivity instruments where scheduling allows, sharing of residual fits in a designated professional list rather than through the press. At the bottom, I sign, submitted by Alex Reed, Science and Special Projects, National News Service, NNS, in coordination with Dr. Lila Ortiz, Lowell, Dr. Ana Reyes, CTIO, Dr. Mark Harrison, VLA. I hover for a second before adding their names. Then I delete the parenthetical labels. Let their work speak in whatever channels they choose. I'll carry the heat. I copy the text into the MPC2 submission form, filling in the required fields, object designation, time range, justification. The web form is aggressively unglamorous, beige and blue, as if it's trying to reassure you that nothing extraordinary ever happens here. It has a little line at the bottom: by submitting this request, you agree that the information provided is accurate to the best of your knowledge. My finger rests on the trackpad. You sure? Maya asks quietly. No, I say. But the numbers are. I click Submit. A small confirmation window pops up. Your request has been recorded. Reference ID 2-2029-3I047. That's it. No trumpets, no lightning bolts. Just a string of characters and the knowledge that somewhere, overnight schedulers and sleepy astronomers will see a new line in their inboxes suggesting they look a little closer at something they were already watching. Congratulations, Jamal says. You just told the grown-ups. We are the grown-ups, I say, but it doesn't sound convincing. The residual plot ticks on. Another point appears, almost exactly on the existing line. No surprise anymore, just confirmation. I minimize the to window, pull up the professional mailing list client we use when we're pretending to be more academic than we are. It's a low-traffic list, mostly preprints and calls for observations. I draft a short note, stripped down even more than the two colleagues. For those following 3i/Atlas, please be advised that several groups, including ours, are seeing a small, persistent residual drift post-perihelion that does not cleanly map onto simple outgassing models. Attached are our current residual plots and fit parameters. This is not a press statement. We are not characterizing the effect beyond what the data show. If you have relevant observations, consider sharing fits and constraints here or through MPC channels. Respectfully, A. Reed, NNS. I attach a low-res version of the plot, axes, dots, no network branding. I send it. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the mailing list server pings back its automatic confirmation: your message has been accepted for distribution. It will go out in the next batch. A new window opens on my screen, unbidden, a live view from one of the southern observatories Reyes has access to. It's not a pretty image, a noisy strip of sky, stars bloated by atmosphere, the object itself invisible except as a number emerging from the photometry script running in a text box beside it. But on the side of that script, half hidden by another window, I see something that makes me stop. It's a second residual column, smaller, labeled with a different identifier. The numbers in it are tiny, near zero, wavering. But they're not random. Every time the main residual steps up, this faint cousin twitches too, a fraction of a fraction behind. You seeing that? I ask, tilting my head toward Jamal's station. He squints. Seeing what? I've got 3 layers of dashboards here. On the remote feed, I say. Right side. Looks like a secondary fit or something. He shifts one of his windows aside, magnifies the remote view. The column I saw comes into clearer focus, a thin list of values, some positive, some negative, struggling to settle on what they want to be. Could be an internal check, he says. Background subtraction, maybe. Or they're fitting something else in the field. Could be, I say. The column updates. A new value appears, just slightly more positive than the last. A tiny echo of the main drift. I take a screenshot before the arrangement of windows changes, crop it down to the text and the column headers, save it as ctio_feed_secondary_resid_0712_AR. I don't know yet what it is. It could be nothing. It could be an artifact of their pipeline, a star they haven't masked out properly, a calibration ghost. Or it could be the first, faint whisper of something moving near 3I/Atlas in a way our models don't have a name for. You gonna ask Reyes about it? Jamal says. Not yet, I say. One anomaly at a time. I tuck the screenshot into my folder, add a line to my notebook, secondary column in CTIO feed, possible co-moving signal? Too early to say. Then I let the monitors pull my gaze back to the main line, the one that already changed our night. Outside, the sky over New York is getting brighter, the city remembering it has a day job. Inside, our clocks still care more about UTC than Eastern. Somewhere between them, a handful of people are now awake to the same small, stubborn deviation. We're no longer alone with our drift. Whether that's comfort or a new kind of pressure, I'm not sure yet. The 2ID sits in my inbox like a seed. The mailing list note will land in 100 scattered mailboxes over the next hour. In Chile, in Arizona, in New Mexico, in little observatories that weren't on any network's rundown. Some of them will ignore it. Some will squint at the plot, shrug, and file it away. A few will point their instruments just a little bit longer tonight. I watch the residual plot march on and tell myself that this is what transparency looks like, not a headline, not a breaking banner, just a quiet line we've chosen to share before anyone has words for it. The room feels colder again. The hold tag is still on our segment, gray and immovable. Out beyond our screens, 3I/Atlas is already further along its path than any of our models say. And somewhere inside a stream of remote numbers from a Chilean telescope, there's that second, fainter column I can't stop thinking about, twitching in time with an object no one has ever seen, as if something just off the main track is trying, very politely, not to be noticed. The morning shows are already chasing some governor's scandal, the chatter in the elevator is about a viral video and the weather, and the only place 3I/Atlas exists is inside my inbox and a half-dozen tabs I haven't closed since 3 a.m. The control room looks different in daylight. The wall of monitors is still there. But somebody turned the overheads back on. The blues and grays that made everything feel underwater now look flat, like a set that's waiting for extras. The residual plot is minimized to a corner window on my screen, just another graph in a city full of graphs. My mailbox has grown a second spine since we hit send on the mailing list. Subject lines stack up. 3I/Atlas residuals, preliminary comment. 3I/Atlas, fit from, OBS code. Target of opportunity 2, 2029-3I047, acknowledged. And, between them, an entirely different cluster. Segment status, urgent. Language guidance, 3I/Atlas. External coordination, approval needed. Two universes, sharing the same interface. I skim the professional replies first. Priorities. One European group writes, our residuals from last night show a small deviation consistent with your fit. Error bars still large. Currently favoring non-uniform outgassing as explanation, but agree geometry is unusual. No public statements planned. A small observatory in South Africa sends a one-line masterpiece, we see the same misbehavior, not ready to call it anything prettier. Lila forwards a note from someone at ESA with the comments stripped down to math. A few numbers, an attached PDF, a sentence, model residuals -1 to 2 mm/s, non-sunward, persistent over several hours. No adjectives, no speculation. Just the thing we already know written in another accent. Then there's Reyes, again. This time with a small attachment and a short message. Alex. We ran a two-source fit on last night's data to check for systematics in the field. Attached is a preliminary plot. Second object is below our usual detection threshold in individual frames, but residuals suggest a co-moving component at slightly different impact parameter. Treat this as internal until we clean it up. Might be nothing. Might be something. I download the file, feeling my pulse tick up just because of the phrase, co-moving component. The plot opens in a basic window, no decoration. Two faint lines on a blown-up section of sky, both blurred by uncertainty, both dragged across time. One is clearly 3I/Atlas, the path we've been following, drift and all. The other is less certain, fainter points, larger error bars, missing data in places. But it's there, a second track offset just enough to be separate, close enough to look like it's trying to stay in formation. I zoom in until the pixels show, until the lines are more suggestion than shape. So that's what you were doing, I murmur. Talking to your graphs again? Jamal asks. He's back in his usual seat, a fresh mug of coffee on his desk, his graphic software open to something completely unrelated, a Chiron's template for a hurricane that may or may not hit the East Coast next week. I swivel my monitor so he can see. Reyes ran a two-source fit. Look. He leans in. Main track, he says, pointing. Our troublemaker. And, what's that? It's little brother. Secondary residual column I saw on their live feed last night, I say. She pulled it into an actual fit. You sure that's not just a bad star mask or a calibration ghost? He asks, because someone has to ask that first. I'm not sure of anything, I say. But they wouldn't have sent it if they thought it was trivial. He squints at the legend. Same general direction, similar drift, just offset. That's cozy. Her email says co-moving component, I say. The phrase feels strange in my mouth, heavy, like a piece of equipment you need two hands for. She also says, might be nothing. Translation, he says, please don't leak this to every UFO blog in America. That's the part where we behave, I say. For once. Before I can answer my own questions about what any of this means, my calendar pings. A meeting invite blocks the top corner of my screen, 1 p.m., special coverage, 3I/Atlas, legal/standard/newsroom. Location, glass conference room, 3rd floor. Duration, 60 minutes. Attendees, me, Maya, our bureau chief, 2 people from standards, 1 lawyer from legal, and a science advisor, TBD. Fun, I say. Good luck, Jamal says. If they ask, I never saw a thing and I only make pretty pictures. The glass conference room has no right to feel like a courtroom. But here we are. The walls are transparent on 3 sides, looking out over rows of open-plan desks and ceiling-mounted TVs running the network feed. The 4th wall is filled by a giant screen currently frozen on a still frame of 3I/Atlas, a placeholder artist's impression we stole from a space agency press kit weeks ago. It's a lumpy rock against a starfield, far prettier than anything we can actually see. The bureau chief, Karen, sits at the head of the table, tablet propped in front of her. Standards is represented by a man named Paula, short for Paul Anthony, he insists, as if that makes it friendlier, and legal has sent Dana, who is younger than I expect and wearing sneakers under her suit. There's also a stranger at the far end of the table with a mug that says, "Ask me about dark matter." Science advisor, identified. So, Karen says, when everyone has their laptops open and their neutral expressions on. We have a situation. We have a story, I say before I can help myself. We have a situation, she repeats, more gently. The story will depend on how we handle the situation. Maya kicks my ankle under the table. I shut up. Paula from Standards clears his throat. First, let's be very clear, he says. We are not under any obligation to be first on this. Our obligation is to be correct, proportional, and not to mislead by implication. I know, I say. That's why I didn't put, "Is it aliens?" on the lower third. He ignores the joke. Your overnight emails with external observatories are proactive, he says. We don't usually see coordination from editorial with that many outside actors before we've even decided if we're covering something. We're not coordinating coverage, I say. We're coordinating data. The to request is standard practice in that community. We're just acting as if you're part of that community, Dana cuts in. Which, from a legal standpoint, muddies what you're doing here. Are you journalists? Are you participants in the research? Both? If something goes sideways, who owns the responsibility? We own the decision to publish, Karen says calmly, sliding her gaze between us. We do not own gravity. Or whatever this is. Let's focus. Alex, walk us through what we know in 1 minute. No metaphors. I take a breath, strip it down. Post-perihelion observations of 3I/Atlas from multiple telescopes show a small but persistent deviation from the purely gravitational trajectory we'd expect, I say. The magnitude is on the order of a millimeter per second over several hours. That's small in physical terms, but statistically meaningful in the models. Standard non-gravitational explanations like outgassing don't fit perfectly, because the direction of the drift isn't sunward and the magnitude overshoots the expected floor based on composition assumptions. One-sentence summary. Karen prompts. The object is drifting in a way we didn't quite predict, and the usual suspects don't fully explain it, I say. The guy with the dark matter mug nods. That's accurate, he says. I'm Michael, by the way. Columbia. I've been on a couple of the agency calls this morning. The consensus there is, interesting, but not yet extraordinary. The phrase, model deficiencies has been used more than once. Of course it has, I say under my breath. Additionally, he continues, there are some early hints, very early, that there may be a second, fainter object with a similar trajectory in some of the deep follow-up data. But that is highly tentative and not something I would put anywhere near a microphone. A silence follows that sentence that feels heavier than anything else we've said. Karen glances at me. You've seen something along those lines, she asks. An internal plot from CTO, I admit. Reyes shared a two-source fit. Fainter track, similar direction, slightly offset. She labeled it, co-moving component and underlined, might be nothing. I have the file on our server, hashed and logged. Of course you do, Dana says, not quite disapproving, not quite amused. Here's where we land, then, Paula says, tapping his tablet as if punctuation is the same as pressure. We have an object that isn't strictly following our textbook path and possibly something else nearby that may or may not be real. The internet already wants this to be aliens. Our policy is clear, no extraordinary language without overwhelming evidence. No one's arguing for aliens, I say. They don't have to, he replies. All you have to do is say, mysterious drift, and show a picture of a rock from outside the solar system, and you know exactly where the audience's head goes. We can't control their imaginations, but we can control our scripts. So what can we say? Maya asks. Practical, always. Michael leans forward. If you say anything today, I'd stick to the following. There are early indications that 3I/Atlas is not perfectly matching pre-perihelion trajectory predictions. Astronomers are comparing models and considering whether subtle forces like outgassing or radiation pressure are sufficient to explain the deviation. Some teams are requesting more observations to refine the picture. And the possible second object? I ask. You don't touch that, he says. Not yet. It's barely above noise. If it doesn't hold up, you've polluted the well for everyone who tries to do careful work on it later. Right now, it lives in Slack channels and private emails. It doesn't belong on air, and it certainly doesn't belong in a lower third. I nod, even as some stubborn part of me bristles. I get it. I do. But I've seen that second column twitching in time. It's hard to unsee. So here's the compromise, Karen says. We greenlight a digital piece, a long-form, text-only explainer on our site about what it means for an interstellar object to deviate from predictions. No video, no dramatic music, no breaking news banner. Just context. We can all overthink the language, sign off on every sentence. On television, we run a 30-second mention at most, tonight or tomorrow, sticking to the most conservative phrases. Nothing suggestive, nothing speculative. And we keep logging, I say. And you keep logging, she confirms. Quietly. If this turns into something that forces a bigger conversation later, we'll be glad we have the receipts. Legal will live if you're careful. Right, Dana? Dana lifts one shoulder. Keep your coordination in the data sharing for context lane, she says. Don't present yourself as co-authors on any paper. Don't embargo jump anybody. Don't put words in scientists' mouths that they didn't say. Do that, and I can defend almost anything. And the two? Paula asks. Any concern about the optics of a news organization filing one? The form allows submissions from interested parties including non-academic entities, Michael says. It's unusual, but not unethical. Especially since Alex didn't make any claims beyond "please look more closely." Yet, Paula says. We're done here, Karen decides. Alex, write your explainer. Maya, you and I will work on the on-air script with standards notes. Michael, send us a memo summarizing how the scientific community is reacting, with emphasis on the words cautious and preliminary. And if anyone says co-moving companion into a camera, I will unplug the camera myself. Meeting adjourned. No sentence pronounced, no gavel. Just the soft scrape of chairs and the shuffle of people back into their lanes. On the way out, Michael falls into step beside me. You're handling this better than some of the folks I've watched, he says. For what it's worth. Is that the academic version of a nice job, kid? I ask. Something like that, he says. He hesitates. Off the record, not for any script, the co-moving whisper is making the rounds. Quietly. People are curious. But curious isn't the same thing as convinced. Off the record, not for any script, I echo. What did you see? He thinks about it. Two fits, he says. One we all expected to exist, misbehaving a bit. One we didn't expect at all, barely there, trying very hard not to be noticed. That's all. We reach the elevator. He peels off toward the science unit, I head back down to the control room. The hall is full of the afternoon hum now, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, somebody laughing too loudly down the row. Downstairs, it's dim again. Maya's killed most of the overheads on purpose, so the screens reclaim their glow. How was the tribunal? Jamal asks. We're still allowed to use verbs, I say. As long as they're boring. And we are absolutely forbidden from saying co-moving companion anywhere near a microphone. He raises his mug. To forbidden phrases. I sit, wake my monitors. The CTIO plot is still open, two faint tracks on a dark background. I tile it next to our own residual plot, then open one more window, a simple, almost crude, overlay I mocked up during the meeting. Our drift line in one color, Reyes's second track in another, both aligned in time. They're not identical. They're offset in phase, amplitude, whatever you want to call it. But they breathe together. When one dips, the other twitches. When one climbs, the other leans. Not perfectly, not in a way that would make a clean PR graphic. But enough to make my skin prickle. An alert pops up from the professional mailing list. New message in the 3i/Atlas thread. From M. Krauss, observatory I vaguely recognize from previous lives. Subject, 3i/Atlas residuals, early thoughts. Colleagues. Thanks to those who shared fits. We also see a modest post-perihelion deviation from the nominal orbit in our own data, details attached. At this stage, I would emphasize. Systematics are hard. Interstellar objects may not be dynamically simple. There might be a co-moving companion or structured ejecta, but existing evidence is marginal. I suggest we proceed as we always should, slowly, collectively, and without adjectives. Best. MK. There it is, I say aloud. What? Jamal asks. The phrase, I say. There might be a co-moving companion. He swears softly. They typed it, he says. On a list. That counts as summoning, right? I guess we're past the point where it's just something in my screenshots, I say. I copy the line into my notebook, tag it with the date and time and message ID. Not because I want to splash it across a Chiron, but because this is one of those moments when the narrative shifts from my weird experience to our shared suspicion. The afternoon slides by in segments. I carve out the digital explainer Karen asked for, no more than we agreed. I explain, in plain language, what a residual is, why models sometimes miss, why we didn't predict this perfectly is not the same thing as physics is broken. I sneak in Lila's line about residuals not being opinions. I cut it back down when Standards flags the phrase, we didn't predict this perfectly, as overly self-critical. The sun sinks. The view from the tiny window at the far end of the hall turns from gray to orange to black. The day shift thins. Up on the studio floor, the evening shows spin through their rundown, politics, storms, a celebrity profile. Our 30-second astronomers are evaluating new data, blip airs just before the last commercial break of the 9 p.m. hour. No graphics. A shot of an agency spokesperson at a podium, a single sentence from our anchor, a generic starfield. If you blinked, you missed it. Downstairs, I don't watch our own broadcast. I watch the line. After 11, Maya taps my shoulder. Go home, she says. You? I ask. I have 2 kids and a partner who will text me increasingly pointed emojis if I don't, she says. You, on the other hand, live 5 subway stops away and apparently consider server noise a lullaby. Stay if you want, but at least pretend you're taking a break. I'll be fine, I say. I know, she says. That's what worries me. She leaves with a wave, the door closing behind her with a soft hiss. The control room shrinks again, all edges and screens and the low constant rush of air through vents. It's back to just me and the monitors. The residual plot has grown a second panel since sunset. Jamal, before he left, split the window, one for 3i/Atlas, one for what he labeled, in tiny, almost apologetic text, candidate secondary track. On the left, the main objects drift over the last day, dots marching away from the old cone in steady, stubborn increments. On the right, the faint echo from CTIO and a couple of other deep stacks who bothered to run 2-source solutions. It's a Messier line, bigger error bars, more gaps. But the shape is there. Ghosting the first. I take off my headset, let it hang around my neck. The room sounds different without the constant low-level chatter of comms. Just the hum, the occasional click from the cooling of some overworked rack, the distant elevator ding 3 floors up. My eyes blur a little if I stare too long, so I alternate. Left panel. Right panel. Left again. Everyone has a version, I say quietly, thinking of the thread. MPC updates, guarded agency statements, careful academic comments. None of them match. But they rhyme. I open the log file. Not the raw feed, just my own notebook, the text document that started as a place to dump quotes and times and has slowly become something else. A record of what the numbers looked like the moment they were more than noise. I add a new entry. 2137 Universal Time Coordinated, Krauss mailing list comment, there might be a co-moving companion, first explicit phrasing in a shared channel. Evidence still marginal, social gravity no longer is. Under it, I paste a small ASCII sketch of the double track, a crude, text character version of what's on my screen. For me, more than for anyone else. The cursor blinks on the next line. Waiting. Outside the building, the city has gone from noisy to merely restless. The late trains will still be running. The deli on the corner will still make you a sandwich if you buzz after midnight. Out past all of that, beyond streetlights and planes and weather, 2 cold pieces of something that didn't start here are sliding along paths that aren't quite what we thought. Maybe it's just weird outgassing and structured debris and the universe showing off how creative it can be with the same old rules. Maybe the second track is a processing artifact that will vanish when someone with more patience cleans the data. Maybe, in a week, we'll all shrug and write papers about how we learned not to overinterpret noisy fits. For tonight, though, there are 2 lines on my screen that move like they're listening to the same silent song. I lean back in the chair, let the monitors paint the ceiling in pixelated light. The hold tag in the CMS is still there, gray and flat, stapled to our segment. The advisory emails from legal and standard sit in their folder, fully read, fully obeyed. On paper, nothing radical has happened. We logged, we shared, we stayed boring. On the wall, under the thin plastic frame of the residual plot window, the slopes say otherwise. My phone buzzes once on the desk. A message from Lila, I'm seeing echoes in our deep stack too. Nothing solid, but it's not just chilly. Still no adjectives. Still just numbers. I type back, numbers are enough. Then I backspace it, replace it with, got it. Logging. I set the phone down, face up this time, let its screen go dark alongside the others. On the monitors, the 2 trajectories hang there, one bright, one barely there, parallel but not identical. Like handwriting on thin paper, traced over with a second pen 1 desk over. I watch them a little longer, until my eyes sting. At some point I'm going to have to stand up, stretch, go find leftover coffee or cold water or an excuse to remember there's a world outside this room. Instead, I sit very still and think a single, unspoken question I don't dare write into any log yet. If this isn't a coincidence, what kind of conversation have we just walked into? The screens don't answer. They just keep their quiet lines, waiting for the next set of dots to arrive. At 1:02 a.m., the building feels like an empty shell somebody forgot to switch off. The studio floors upstairs are dark, the glass-walled newsroom is a scatter of sleeping monitors and abandoned coffee cups. Down in the control room, it's just me, the low rumble of HVAC, and 3 screens that care what UTC thinks time is. On the main wall, Jamal's split residual plot waits in its night mode, left panel for 3i/Atlas, right panel for the maybe companion. 2 sets of dots, 2 thin, shaky lines. The kind of picture that would mean nothing to 99% of the planet and everything to the 1% reading it correctly. I crack my knuckles, hit refresh on the live data feed. New timestamps blink into the log window. 1 hour 3 minutes and 11 seconds, 1 hour 3 minutes and 37 seconds. 1 hour 4 minutes and 2 seconds, the script chews through them, spits out updated positions, updates the residuals. On the left panel, a fresh dot appears just above the old drift line. On the right, another dot lands a heartbeat later, nudging its own wavering track the same way. Still there, I say to the empty room. Still misbehaving. A soft ping from my laptop pulls my eyes away. Group call request, L_Ortiz, A_Reyes, M_Harrison, M_Kraus. Subject, late night sanity check. I slip on my headset, accept. The screen fills with a grid of small faces in badly lit offices and control rooms across the hemisphere. Lila in Flagstaff, hair pulled back, mug big enough to swim in. Reyes in a cramped control booth at CTIO, red light glowing over her head. Harrison at the VLA, background all steel and cables. Kraus somewhere in Europe, framed by a window full of darkness. Alex, you're still at the network? Lila says, like she knows the answer and doesn't approve. Someone has to babysit the graphs, I say. You all see the latest set? Yeah, Reyes says. Her mic pops once, then settles. Your residuals are in. Ours, South Africa's, couple of small guys. They're all singing the same off-key tune. Kraus clears his throat. Let's be systematic, he says. First, 3I/Atlas main track. Magnitude of deviation, direction, time profile. Then the secondary. Agreed, Harrison says. One weird thing at a time. I drag our latest residual table into the shared workspace. Numbers populate the shared screen, times, positions, residuals in arc seconds. Drift is still roughly 1 mm per second over the last 6 hours, Lila says, scribbling on something off-screen. Non-sunward component remains dominant. No sign it's decaying the way a one-off outgassing event would. If anything, it's cleaner now. Less noise. Solar radiation pressure? Harrison asks. We've all checked that, but humor me. Wrong scaling with distance, Kraus says. If SRP were driving this much at perihelion, it would fall off more sharply by now. And you'd need a ridiculous area to mass ratio. This thing would have to be a sail, not a rock. We're past perihelion anyway, I say. The Oberth moment's gone. Small pushes don't buy you as much now. That's true for any natural jetting, too, Lila says. If it dumped a lot of volatiles near perihelion, you'd expect some messy behavior then and a tail off now. Instead, we're getting this steady, polite drift. On the shared screen, a red line appears, Kraus's overlay, showing what a boring, non-gravitational solution would look like under textbook assumptions. Our dots sit above it, slightly askew, like they're avoiding the script. Models still converge, Kraus says. You can always tweak parameters until something fits. Different outgassing geometry, shape, spin state, you can get there. But every tweak you make is a story you're telling yourself. And the story is getting contrived, Reyes says. I glance at the right panel. The secondary track waits, pale and hesitant. And our quieter friend? I ask. Reyes sighs. We stacked last night's deep exposure again with a different background model. The second track's still there. Fainter, but it doesn't go away when we change the pipeline. It shifts with the main stack, keeps the same general drift direction, slightly different projected distance from the sun. She pushes an image into the shared window, a zoomed-in patch of sky with two ghostly lines traced across it in different colors. Main object in white, she says. Candidate secondary in blue. Error bars exaggerated so no one gets cocky. We only see the blue one consistently in the deep stacks. Single frames? It's basically invisible. And the direction of motion matches? Lila asks. Within our ridiculous uncertainties, yes, Reyes says. Same general arc, different impact parameter. Could be structured ejecta, Harrison offers. Clump of debris thrown off in a preferred direction. That would show up as a second component co-moving for a while. Maybe, Krauss says. But then you'd expect some dispersion. The clump would smear out over time, get fuzzy. Right now the secondary's crude but tight. Could still be systematics, Lila says. Bad flat field, missed star, some nasty bit of optics nobody mapped. I would love it to be a missed star, Reyes says. Stars don't file 2 requests, though. She nods toward my corner of the call. Hey, my 2 was boring, I say. I promised no adjectives. And you kept that promise, Krauss says. Which is why people are still taking your emails. The line of dots on the left panel ticks again. New data. Our shared script updates. Another point appears, 1 hour 7 minutes and 29 seconds. Slight nudge upward. Reyes's own terminal, visible over her shoulder, lights up as her local copy does the same. She glances back at it, then back to us. Okay, she says. Watch this. We're about to get the next CTIO point on the secondary fit. Second stretch. The shared feed from Chile lags by a heartbeat. Then their log window scrolls. New row. The secondary column fills in. On our right panel, a new blue dot appears. It lifts, in miniature, the way the main object did a moment earlier. Not perfectly. Not in strict lockstep. But close enough that my brain insists on seeing it as a pair of footsteps rather than random noise. That's, Lila starts. Coincidence, Krauss says, as if saying it out loud will make it true. 99.something%, Harrison says. We're trained to assume that. And the remaining percent? I ask. Is why we log, he says. No one laughs. We spend the next 40 minutes doing what humans have always done when the sky misbehaves, we try to talk ourselves out of it. We tilt the assumed outgassing jets in every direction, spin the object faster, then slower. We fatten the cross-section to make solar radiation pressure work, then shrink it again to keep it from blowing apart. Every time we fix the main object, the secondary gets weirder. When we make the secondary look reasonable, the main one steps out of line. At some point, the equations on the shared whiteboard stop looking like tools and start looking like excuses. Here's the thing, Krauss says at last, rubbing his eyes. We can make the math obey us if we push it hard enough. But we're inventing structure to explain structure. Translation? I ask. Natural explanations are not impossible, he says. They're just losing points for elegance. Has anyone shown this to any of the agency folks? Harrison asks. Unofficially, Michael's voice says from the edge of the call. I didn't notice he'd joined, his icon must have lit up while I was staring at the plots. They're aware. The line right now is, we are investigating possible sources of non-gravitational acceleration, including outgassing, asymmetric mass loss, and modeling uncertainties. They will not mention a second component without a gun to their heads. Good, Lila says. Last thing we need is a press conference about a mysterious follower, while we're still arguing over flat fields. As your unofficial network babysitter, Michael adds, my advice stands, you see what you see. You log what you see. You don't call it anything more specific than complex behavior. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Even if it's doing something that looks like coordination. I ask before I can swallow the word. He doesn't answer right away. None of them do. In the silence, another pair of dots appear, left panel, right panel. The first shifts a hair downward this time, as if easing off. The second twitches in the same sense a moment later. It's not about what it looks like to us, Michael says finally. It's about what we can defend in a stack of plots 5 years from now when nobody remembers how tired we were tonight. He's right. I know he's right. It still feels like standing at the edge of a stage, listening to music from behind the curtain and pretending it's just random noise. We should document this window as cleanly as we can, Krauss says, dragging us back to the practical. Stack everything, archive the residuals, tag all the parameters. If it keeps doing this, we'll be glad. If it doesn't, at least we won't have to trust our memories. I'll handle local archive on our side, I say. We've got the bandwidth. And the paranoia. Copy that, Reyes says. I'll send you our raw residual tables and the configuration of the two-source fit. Internal only. Same from us, Lila says. No pretty plots yet. Just the ugly truth. We break. One by one, their little windows wink out, leaving the control room's reflection floating faintly on my darkened screen, my own face framed by racks of equipment and the soft pulse of LEDs. Then it's just me again. One location. One truth. The monitors are the only light. The left panel's white path and the right panel's faint blue echo look like someone underlined the night twice. I open a new directory on the secure server /special_archive/3i_atlas_duet/. Inside it, I start to lay out the evidence like items on a table. First, the raw residuals from our main feed, all the way back to the start of the drift. Then the CTIO two-source tables, Reyes's calibration notes, Krauss's overlay scripts. I add snapshots of the split residual plot at key times, the moment the secondary track first peaked out of noise, the clearest synchronous nudge, the last pair of dots in tonight's window. For each file, I run the hash tool. One by one, it prints out those long hexadecimal fingerprints. I paste them into a plain text manifest. 3i_main_resids_utc_24h.csv, SHA-256, string. 3i_secondary_candidate_ctio_24h.csv, SHA-256, string. 3i_split_plot_0107 utc.png, SHA-256, string. At the top of the manifest, I type archive created by a read NNS for long-term verification. No interpretation implied, only state of data as received and processed under configurations described in attached README. In the README, I keep it bare. Configuration. Time standard. Known caveats. Notable patterns. Primary and secondary residuals exhibit approximate covariation in sign and timing over window. I hover before that last line, then add two words, approximate, tentative. I duplicate the entire archive to an offline drive in the rack behind me, the one we usually use for long-term storage of raw satellite feeds. When the copy finishes, I label the drive in our asset manager. 3i_atlas_duet_archive_01, do not overwrite. For good measure, I write the hash of the manifest itself on a sticky note and press it onto the inside cover of my notebook, next to Lila's line about residuals and the mailing list phrase, co-moving companion. The act of writing it down in ink feels absurdly analog compared to all the code on the screens, but the weight of the notebook in my hand makes it real in a way the files don't. I sit back. Exhale. On the wall, the plots haven't moved in a minute. The latest data window has passed, the geometry is bad for a while. The residuals drift into a pause, not flat, not resolved, just on hold until the next set of eyes can see. The hold tag in the CMS is still there too, gray and patient, stapled to our segment. No one has touched it. On air, we're still in the "astronomers are evaluating new data" phase. Viewers will go to bed tonight thinking about elections and storms and maybe a feel-good rescue story, not about two lines on a graph in a dark room. Part of me is grateful. Part of me feels like I'm sitting in the front row of a play that hasn't opened yet. I kill the shared call software, close the mailing list tab, leave only what matters, the twin tracks, the log window, the archive directory. My cursor blinks at the end of the manifest. I add one last sentence. Created not for proof, but for memory. I save. The drive light flickers, then holds steady. The room is very quiet. Upstairs, the network is probably running some overnight rebroadcast, anchors from earlier in the day looping through their perfectly lit scripts. Here, the only light is the cold glow from the monitors, painting my hands in ghost colors as I rest them on the edge of the console. For the first time since this started, I'm not thinking about being first, or being right, or whether we'll ever be allowed to say more than complex behavior on air. I'm thinking about the fact that, for a brief slice of time in this building, we saw something the universe might only do once, and we managed, despite policy, despite fear, to leave a coherent trace of it. I stand, slowly. My knees complain. I stretch, vertebrae popping in the hush. On the wall, the two lines hang there like handwriting in a language we don't speak, frozen at the last words of a sentence they're not finished with. In a few hours, I'll walk out into a perfectly ordinary Manhattan morning. The sunlight will bounce off glass, taxis will honk, the news ticker outside will scroll through its usual diet of politics and markets and sports. Nobody on the sidewalk will have any reason to look up and imagine two small, dark shapes somewhere overhead, drifting together along a path our equations are still struggling to name. I take one last look at the screens, at the archive directory, at the sticky note in my notebook with its long, ugly hash. Then I reach for the lights. For a moment, my hand hovers over the switch. Somewhere beyond the ceiling, beyond the city, beyond the soft curve of the planet, those two objects are still moving, still doing whatever it is they do when no one's watching, or when only a handful of us are. I flip the switch. The room falls into darkness, except for the monitors, which keep on glowing, twin tracks suspended in the artificial night, waiting for the next window, the next set of eyes, the next quiet decision about what to call what we've already seen. By the time I ride the elevator back up, the building has traded one kind of glow for another. Night's blue smear is gone from the windows, Manhattan is a stack of pale rectangles and exhaust plumes, the sky a washed-out gray that promises nothing in particular. The lobby TV still plays our overnight rebroadcast, faces from 12 hours ago talking about things that have already scrolled past. No one in line at the coffee kiosk looks up. The hallway to the control room smells like burnt coffee and cleaning chemicals. A janitor's cart is parked by the stairwell, someone's left a pair of latex gloves draped over the edge like a molted skin. Inside the control room, the monitors are still on. Last night's plots sit frozen where I left them, twin tracks suspended in digital midnight. The timestamp in the upper corner is a few hours old now, the stream idle. Our archive directory sits open on my middle screen, the manifest with its ugly hashes waiting for no one. I set my bag down, stand there a moment just letting my eyes adjust. The night version of the room is still in my body, the hum, the isolation. But it's morning. Upstairs, producers are already building new rundowns. Outlook calendars have reset themselves to fresh blocks of anxiety. I reach for the keyboard, do the thing I didn't quite let myself do before I hit the lights. One by one, I shut the plots down. The residual window disappears. The twin-track image rolls up into a thumbnail, then vanishes. The log window closes with its neat little click. The archive directory remains, quietly, on a separate drive. No drama. Just an open folder with a different kind of weight. Then I kill the feed, and the main wall goes from Starfield black to the neutral blue of the control software home screen. A menu of inputs. A list of shows. No traces of 3i/Atlas. No traces of its companion. Just a slot labeled News Hour and another labeled Breaking if needed. Morning, Maya says behind me. I turn. She's at the door with a paper coffee cup and a braid that looks like it went up in an elevator mirror. You look like somebody turned you off and back on again, she says. Feels like it, I say. You're early. I'm late for other people, she says. But I wanted to catch you before you vanished into whatever daylight looks like for you. She nods at the now boring monitors. You actually shut it down. Just the front end, I say. The archives on the cold drive. Everything we saw is there. Good, she says. Even if nothing else comes of it, we have, what did you call it? A coherent trace. Something like that, I say. She sips her coffee, eyes flicking to the CMS terminal. The hold tag still sits next to our segment slug, 3i/atlas_draft_analysis. You know Standards is already talking about lifting that in a week or two, she says. Turn it into one of those slow burn explainers. What we learned from an interstellar visitor we barely understood. With a thumbnail of an artist's impression and some tasteful star lens flare. Of course they are, I say. Are they going to quote anyone who actually stayed awake for this? Maya shrugs. They'll quote whoever says the least interesting things in the most careful way. That's how we survive. She pauses. You going home? In a minute, I say. Go watch the sky be blue for a while, she says. The numbers will still be here when you come back. She leaves me with that, and the room settles around her absence. I power down the last console. The screens go black one by one, until only the smallest monitor in the corner is left, its clock still ticking, green digits in a dark frame. For a moment, in the sudden absence of light, I see the twin trajectories more clearly than when they were on the wall, two pale lines burned into the backs of my eyes, drifting together inside my own head. I blink them away, pick up my bag, and step out into the hallway. The newsroom is fully awake now. Banks of desks like school rows, staff leaning toward their screens. The morning editorial meeting has just broken up, people spill out of the glass conference room in knots of 3 and 4, juggling tablets and muffins. On the big central monitor, the channel is running a segment on a heat dome in the Midwest. A thin ribbon of text crawls along the bottom. NASA, interstellar object shows unexpected drift, experts urge caution. It hangs there for maybe 10 seconds, then slides off the edge of the screen, replaced by something about inflation. No one stops what they're doing. I stand by the doorway, watching my own story reduced to 14 bland words and a set of quotation marks. It's not wrong. It's not enough. It might be exactly what this deserves, for now. Karen catches my eye from across the room. She lifts her chin in a question, you okay? I nod. She gives me the small, professional smile we all practice and disappears into her office, phone already at her ear. On my way to the elevators, I pass the printout wall. Some departments still like to tape headlines up, old school. It's a collage of our recent greatest hits, tornado aftermath, election analysis, a big investigative series about groundwater. In the bottom right corner, there's a single sheet from our website, hastily printed and pinned. Why it's hard to predict an interstellar wanderer. The subhead reads, 3i/Atlas isn't exactly following the playbook, but that doesn't mean the rules are broken. My byline is under it in a font that looks smaller than it does online. Someone has circled the phrase, complex behavior, in red pen and written, good, in the margin, probably Paula or one of his people. There's a small coffee stain in the corner. The paper curls away from the pin, already forgetting it's supposed to be flat. In the reflection of the glass over the printout, I can see myself looking at my own words. For a second I try to imagine the paragraph that might have been there if we lived in a world where you could just say what you saw without turning it into either a punchline or a panic. I can't. Not cleanly. The moment passed somewhere between the first residual and the first lawyer. Outside, the morning hits me like a different kind of monitor glow. The sidewalk on 8th Avenue is already crowded, commuters with headphones, kids with backpacks, a man selling umbrellas from a crate even though it's not supposed to rain. Steam rises from a subway grate and gets torn to pieces by traffic. I walk east. The air tastes like exhaust and old rain. Everything is bright and specific, the scuff marks on the curb, the flicker of a "don't walk" sign blurring to "walk," the reflection of clouds in an office tower. After 15 hours in a room where my entire world was filtered through numbers and false color plots, this feels almost indecent. At the corner, a digital billboard cycles through ads, streaming service, sportswear, a pharmaceutical name that sounds like a minor planet. For half a second, between spots, the screen shows a generic space image, stars, a nebula, behind a promo for a science podcast. The caption reads, "Are we really alone?" in big, friendly letters. I actually laugh. It comes out more tired than amused. My phone buzzes in my pocket. I fish it out on reflex. A notification from the preprint server, new submission in your watch list, preliminary constraints on non-gravitational forces in the trajectory of interstellar object 3I/Atlas. Underneath, the names of 3 authors I recognize from last night's call. For a breath or two, I consider opening it right here on the sidewalk, letting the city blur around me while I scroll through equations and see how much of our strange little duet made it into the public record. I don't. I thumb the notification away, let it collapse into the icon. The paper will still be there after I've slept, after I've had something that isn't vending machine coffee, after my brain has reset enough to tell distinction between a meaningful signal and the noise of my own exhaustion. A bus roars past, scattering a flock of pigeons. They take off in a messy, coordinated burst, wings beating the same air, not quite aligned, not quite separate. People step around me. The "walk" sign flashes green again. Life continues. On the train, I get a seat by the window. The tunnel walls rush past in stuttering segments, graffiti and rust and rivulets of water. Inside the car, everyone's face is lit by a screen of some kind. A few are scrolling through our site. I catch the layout of my own explainer on one man's phone as he flicks past it without slowing down. He stops on a video of a dog skateboarding instead. I don't take it personally. By the time I reach my stop in Brooklyn, the day has settled into that hazy mid-morning state where the sun is high but not harsh. My block is a quieter universe, trees in miniature planters, a bodega with its gate half up, a kid practicing layups alone on a cracked court. Upstairs, my apartment smells faintly like cold coffee and whatever I cooked last night before work. I drop my bag, toe off my shoes, and let myself collapse sideways onto the couch without bothering with the ritual of shower then sleep. The curtains are half open, letting a soft stripe of light land across the coffee table. My laptop sits there, lid closed. The same preprint notification glows faintly on my phone where I dropped it on the cushion. I close my eyes. Behind them, the monitors come back. Not as glaring rectangles this time, but as traces, a pair of lines in the dark, white and blue, sliding across a grid of nothing. No axes, no error bars. Just motion. It occurs to me, not for the first time, that I'm probably not the only person in this city, or this planet, lying down right now with that picture in their head. Lila in Arizona, Reyes in Chile, Kraus wherever the sky is still black. Maybe Michael, against his better judgment. Maybe some grad student who hasn't told their advisor yet that they ran a two-source fit for fun and found something that refuses to go away. Scattered bodies under different ceilings, all seeing the same invisible script. Somewhere above all of us, the actual objects are already farther along than any of our plots can show. They're past our last timestamp, past the range where we can measure anything useful with the instruments we have. Whatever co-moving meant for them in this narrow little window, it's not ours to parse anymore. They'll keep going until they don't. We'll keep guessing until we don't. I lie there and listen to my buildings hum, the elevator, the pipes, somebody's TV bleeding a laugh track through the wall. It sounds, for once, almost exactly like the control room. I think about the hold tag in the CMS, still gray, still clamped onto a segment that might never air in the way I imagined. I think about the archive sitting on that drive downtown, hash numbers matching the ones in my notebook. I think about how, for all our formats and policies and graphics packages, the most honest thing we did was quietly save some files under a name that nobody will ever see on a lower third. I don't know if anyone will ever call that second track a companion in print, or if the phrase, co-moving, will survive peer review, or if 5 years from now some other object will drift through our system and make all of this look quaint. I don't know if what we saw was intention, or structure, or a trick of geometry in a universe that likes to surprise its own equations. I do know this: 2 lines appeared where we only expected one, and for a brief, sleepless span of nights, we were there to witness how they moved together. The light on the coffee table shifts, inching across a stack of unpaid bills and a mug with a ring at the bottom. Outside, a car alarm chirps once, thinks better of it, falls silent. My eyes are heavy now. The last thing I see, before I let them close for real, is the faint imprint of those 2 trajectories still hanging behind my eyelids, thin, pale strokes on an endless black, angled away from the sun and from us, drifting in tandem toward whatever waits in the dark. They don't slow down. They don't hurry. They just keep going.